So let's bring into the conversation the president and director counsel of the NAACP, Legal Defense and Educational Fund, Sherrilyn Ifill. Thank you very much for coming on. So within that backdrop, the president is also saying that he has done more for black people than any president at all, potentially even Abraham Lincoln. We won't touch on that, but he touted his executive order of including things, reform for black Americans that have never been tried before. Is that true?
No, it's not true, Mika. Good morning. What we saw yesterday was a really cynical rebranding exercise by the president, and particularly cynical because the families of people who have been unarmed African Americans who've been killed by the police were present and had met with him. This is an issue that's been going on for a very long time, and the president is late to the party. He is attempting now to try to pivot. He reads the polls also. He sees that there are protests in 50 states. We should remember this is not disconnected from protests that began in 2014 with the killing of Eric Garner and the killing of Mike Brown. If we're going to talk about the civil rights movement, it was cumulative. You don't get 1963 without 1954 in Brown and without Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. So this has been going on since 2014. And in 2014 and 2015, when we saw the killing of Freddie Gray and Walter Scott, this president had nothing to say about it except to talk about law and order and to excoriate a peaceful protester, a football player, a quarterback who knelt quietly on the sidelines to protest what people are protesting in 50 states today. So yesterday's exercise was actually really quite appalling. And then when you read the language of the executive order, this is a president who, when he wants to do something by executive order, is quite forceful. Think about the Muslim ban. Think about some of the other immigration orders. He's very clear and direct in what he wants. This executive order is about encouraging, and it's about asking people to address. There's no real teeth in it. This was a photo op, and around an issue this serious, for the president to stand there surrounded by law enforcement, no members of the community who have been talking about this issue for years, and engage in this effort to kind of rebrand himself on this issue was really, really quite grotesque, to be frank.
Wow. Michael Steele.
Madam Chair, I have a question a broader question with respect to the politics here. You've got Tim Scott in the Senate that's working on a Republican bill that presumably we'll get to see a little bit more about over the next day or so. Next week, they're going to hold a discussion and vote on it. The House clearly has its bill that's going. How realistic that anything that comes really close to what we need to see happening on the streets of America to deal with policing in the black community, how realistic are we to expect something this spring, summer? Because my feeling is it's just not there. I just don't see in the main the House Democrats coming to the table over Tim's bill and the Republicans buying what the House is selling at this point.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm optimistic. I mean, when we held the hearing on the bill, my Republican colleagues spent the entire time talking about defunding police and rioting. They didn't say much about the bill at all. And the fact that I believe that they have taken some of the major categories of the bill, mimicked the bill, as I said before, I think they took the teeth out of it. But you just think of a variety of issues. Think of health care, think of guns. When we had those issues come up and when Democrats proposed legislation, it wasn't as though there was alternatives proposed by Republicans that mimicked that Democratic legislation. So I think the fact that we're talking about the same issues in our bills, to me, I'm optimistic that we will get somewhere. And then you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people around the world protesting on this. Neither one of those issues did did that in a sustained manner. People have been protesting for almost 30 days, and there isn't any indication that it's going to stop. And 70% of the U.S. public supports and understands what is going on and feels that we need to do something fundamental in our country to address law enforcement. And one of the things that I said that I like about the bill is that we are holding police accountable, but we are also doing things to help police. When I met with the Fraternal Order of Police, they said they have been pushing for national standards and accreditations for years. But there's 18,000 police departments around the country, and they've been doing it in a retail matter. They frankly asked for our help and said, if you do this nationally, then that is going to help us as well. I don't believe that police officers want to work with brutal people who violate civil rights, but we have to change the culture. So part of the bill calls for a duty to intervene. Now, the whole world watched the police officers shove that 75-year-old man down. Now, they lied, and they said he tripped, but everybody could see on video he did not trip. That man is in the hospital today with a fractured skull and is not able to walk. If you remember that video, one of the officers reached down to render aid, and another officer pulled him away. That's the kind of culture we need to stop. Did you hear about the black female police officer, actually from the same department, I believe? She interfered with one of her white colleagues a year ago who was administering a chokehold, and she was afraid the person was going to be killed. She intervened. She stopped the chokehold. What happened to her? She got fired. That part of police culture needs to end, and I believe that the majority of police officers would like assistance with that, and that's what our bill does. We hold them accountable, we end chokeholds, we end no-knocks, but at the same time, we also provide support for police officers.
Sherrilyn, one of the biggest lies told yesterday was the lie that the Obama administration had done nothing on police practices. After the Michael Brown killing, as you are very aware, and I am very aware, there was a pattern and practice investigation that revealed wholesale abuses in the Ferguson Police Department, and there was a consent order entered. This is the model that the federal government uses to go after police brutality and police abuse across the country. Would you explain to everyone what the Trump administration did to the pattern and practice investigations and the consent orders that were in existence when they came into office?
Yes, after the uprisings that followed the verdict in the Rodney King case, Congress passed the Law Enforcement Misconduct Act, which gives the Attorney General the power to investigate systemic violations, constitutional violations by law enforcement agencies. And the Obama administration, after the Mike Brown killing and the Eric Garner killing, really stepped up in the Department of Justice these investigations and conducted more than 25 investigations in all, 12 consent decrees in Ferguson and in Baltimore. As soon as the Trump administration came in, Attorney General Sessions made clear that he did not approve of consent decrees. There was even an effort, we learned, to try to scuttle the Baltimore consent decree that fortunately went forward because of the exceptional federal judge overseeing the case. And this administration has filed one pattern and practice investigation of one limited facility, I believe in Massachusetts, one as compared to the Obama administration's 25 pattern and practice investigations. The Obama administration also convened a 21st century task force on policing, a presidential commission, which met. I testified before that task force. It issued recommendations that had been begun to be followed and implemented in police departments around the country. That document now sits on a shelf gathering dust in the Department of Justice. And I think few people know that Attorney General Barr and the president in January announced their own law enforcement commission. So here we have the president yesterday issuing an executive order as though he's just come to this issue, when in fact he has had a commission meeting since January. The commission is made up almost entirely of law enforcement officials. They have been conducting meetings. They have work groups. There are 24 work groups. None of them are assigned to look at the issue of police misconduct or unconstitutional policing. In fact, instead, they focus on what they call the crisis of respect for police. The organization I lead, the Legal Defense Fund, has actually sued Attorney General Barr because we believe this commission violates federal law. But that's what the president has been doing. He has been having his own law enforcement commission that no one knows about, meeting and engaging with law enforcement, not engaging with the communities of people affected. And yet yesterday, he then shows up in the Rose Garden as though now he is the savior on an issue that, frankly, he has contributed to the problem. This is the president who announced and said, hey, when you're arresting suspects, don't be too gentle when you put them in the police car. This is the president who encouraged the NFL to drag a black man peacefully protesting off his knees and get the SOB out of there. So that is who this president has been on the issue of policing and unconstitutional policing. And yesterday will not change that reality.
All right, Sherrilyn Ifill, thank you. And chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Karen Bass, thank you as well.
Thank you.
And coming up on Morning Joe.
And I like President Xi a lot. I consider him a friend, but I like him a lot. I've gotten to know him very well. He's a strong gentleman, right? Anybody that is a strong guy, tough guy, very smart.
President Trump has a long history of praising heavy-handed leaders around the world, dictators. We'll ask former Defense Secretary Robert Gates about that and so much more. Just ahead on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.